Breaking news, a major blow to Trump's crackdown on American cities. A judge just blocking Trump's deployment of National Guard troops to Chicago for at least 2 weeks, warning that it will only, quote, add fuel to the fire. The judge also calling the use of chemical agents against protesters, quote, arbitrary and indiscriminate. And in just a moment, I'm going to be speaking with the Chicago pastor who was shot in the head with pepper balls while praying in front of that ICE facility outside Chicago. We told you about him last night. Today, he was granted a restraining order by a judge against the federal government over its use of force against protesters.
Señores, hoy tenemos una de esas noticias impactantes de la semana. Una de esas que nos dejan con la boca abierta, ¿no? De las que creemos que no van a suceder y suceden. Pues un juez federal en Illinois, se trata de la jueza Sarah Ellis, acaba de emitir una orden de restricción temporal contra el gobierno de Donald Trump. El motivo, simple, detener el uso de armamento de control de disturbios, o sea, armamento militar que se está utilizando, escuchen bien, contra periodistas, contra miembros del clero, contra manifestantes pacíficos. Y esperen, porque cuando les lea la lista de cosas que esta orden prohíbe, se les va a volar la cabeza. O sea, es el nivel de poder destructivo que el gobierno está utilizando contra sus propios ciudadanos. Muchos de ellos ni siquiera estaban protestando. Muchos estaban solo haciendo su trabajo. Y ojo que tengo los videos que lo prueban. Bueno, pues esta orden fue resultado de una demanda que fue presentada el pasado 6 de octubre entre el Chicago Headline Club, junto con varios periodistas, líderes religiosos y manifestantes que fueron atacados con gas pimienta, con pelotas de pimienta, con gases lacrimógenos, con municiones químicas, a pesar de estar claramente identificados como prensa o como el clero. Ahora bien, amigos, escuchen esto. La orden de la jueza Ellis establece que los funcionarios del gobierno federal, excepto Trump directamente, tienen prohibido dispersar, arrestar o usar fuerza física contra personas que sepan o no, bueno, deberían saber que son periodistas o miembros del clero. Segundo, emitir órdenes de dispersión en espacios públicos contra quienes tienen el derecho a estar ahí. Tercero, utilizar armas de control de multitudes, como lo son proyectiles cinéticos, lanzadores de aire comprimido, aerosoles químicos, gases lacrimógenos, escopetas de baja letalidad, municiones químicas especiales, granadas de luz y sonido e incluso armas eléctricas contra reporteros o líderes religiosos o manifestantes. Así es, amigos. ¿Vieron esa lista, no? Todo eso es lo que estaban utilizando en las calles de Illinois contra los estadounidenses. Hay pruebas visuales de todo esto. De hecho, parte del material de video fue incluido en el caso judicial, pero bueno, empecemos con la primera prueba para que vean de lo que hablo. Atentos. Pues eso no es todo, porque también hay imágenes de una periodista impactada dentro de su propio auto por una pelota de pimienta y de otras personas derribadas en plena calle. Les preparé dos clips muy interesantes. Vean esto.
While Illinois State Police are investigating after a federal agent fired a projectile at the car of one of our reporters.
The incident happened in Broadview, and that's where our investigative reporter Dave Savini is tonight. Dave?
Joe and Erica, journalists are here on a daily basis just trying to document what's happening here, but federal agents have been repeatedly firing projectiles at them. Yesterday, they fired into a moving car, which was being driven by one of our reporters. You are about to witness an ICE agent in Broadview fire repeated rounds of projectiles in the direction of photojournalists who are trying to document a takedown of a man who was screaming that he couldn't breathe this past Saturday.
Without provocation and acting like jackbooted thugs, ICE has attacked and detained members of the press, including an independent journalist.
In Broadview, we've documented several instances where federal officers fired chemical agents into the crowd, striking anyone in their sights, including members of the media, repeatedly. But on Sunday morning, about a block away from the detention center, it was a quiet scene. No protests at the building itself, just after 11 a.m., when one agent fired a projectile at a moving car, driven by our reporter, Asal Razai. Her window was open.
And you'll hear me multiple times have to clear my throat as I inhaled a lot of some of the powder that you saw here.
The projectile struck her car and exploded, sending a chemical powder through her open window.
An ICE agent that was masked pointed his weapon and shot directly at my car. He saw my window was open.
A CBS Chicago correspondent had chemical munitions fired at her car where there were no protesters in sight.
The ICE facility is here. Helicopter footage from our Skywatch shows you Asal was struck over here, in this lot, where there are private businesses and where we saw people driving in and out all day long.
And he shot right here. You can see the point of impact right there.
She captured this image here at the moment right before the agent shot at her car.
And I was sitting right there with my window open. A lot of it went inside of my car and on my face. I immediately felt it burning. I started throwing up.
One of our CBS photographers found her afterward on the side of her car, vomiting and gasping for air.
We're seeing that ICE just doesn't give a damn. And neither does the President of the United States. He's doing nothing to intervene to make it better.
Now, the Department of Homeland Security says no CBS reporter was attacked, but they haven't answered any of our other specific questions about this incident. Live in Broadview, Dave Savini, back to you.
Here we go. No se toque la cara. Don't rub his face.
Pues bueno, amigos, eso es exactamente lo que esta jueza, que por cierto es designada por Obama, o sea, es de aquel mandato, está intentando detener. Y bueno, más allá del caso puntual, esto manda un mensaje muy fuerte, ¿no?, a otros jueces federales, especialmente a los que están en la Corte de Apelaciones del Noveno Circuito, que el Poder Judicial debe proteger a los ciudadanos de su propio presidente. Porque cuando pones tropas militares, que encima no tienen entrenamiento civil, a que patrullen las calles, pasan estas cosas. Y eso es justo lo que Trump ha estado intentando hacer en varios estados. Pero bueno, esta orden no solo protege a los periodistas, obviamente, también diferencia entre prensa, manifestantes, y bueno, todo indicando que los reporteros pueden identificarse, ¿no?, con chalecos, con credenciales visibles, no participar activamente en canticos o protestas, aunque claro, eso no justifica, ¿no?, atacar a quienes protestan pacíficamente. Ninguno tiene por qué recibir una pelota de pimienta en la cara. Simple. Bueno, esta orden estará vigente por aproximadamente 14 días. ¿Pero por qué? Porque es hasta que la jueza Ellis realice una audiencia completa para poder decidir si la convierte en una prohibición permanente. Bueno, mientras todo eso pasaba en Illinois, en la Corte de Apelaciones del Noveno Circuito, llena de corrupción, se estaba realizando otra audiencia sobre si Trump puede nacionalizar la Guardia Nacional. Amigos, ¿ustedes saben lo que significa eso? Que podría desplegar en distintos estados así de rápido. Ahora, el problema es que 2 de los 3 jueces que vieron este caso lógico, fueron designados por Trump. Y claramente se notó. Es más, la audiencia, amigos, un desastre para el estado de Oregon, el cual estaba intentando impedir que se utilizaran tropas federales en sus calles. Es más, el día de ayer les subí un video del general brigadier, el cual afirmaba que él no estaba para poder realizar este tipo de misiones, que no aceptaba esas órdenes. Y bueno, el estado de Oregon en problemas. En pocas palabras, amigos, los jueces trumpistas no compraron el argumento de que las protestas locales no constituyen una rebelión o una violencia doméstica, porque básicamente estaban buscando justificar cualquier intervención federal. Es más, conseguí parte de la audiencia para que puedan verlo, así que sí, se los voy a poner, pero lean atentamente para que entiendan a qué me refiero.
When the president has authorized the federalization of the National Guard in Oregon, we're asking this court to look at the circumstances around when that happened.
So do we look from June 7th forward, or do we look only at September or something else?
It would make sense it's reasonable to look at around the time period when the National Guard was actually federalized. What happened in June, and we acknowledge
Isn't
that
June around the time period of when the National Guard was federalized?
It was 4 months prior, and that is significant because there can be, and there was, a very large delta between what was going on in June and what was actually going on when the president...
So could the president have, in your view, nationalized the Guard in June?
I think we'd be having a different conversation, and it would certainly be a closer call. But
And so the president loses his right to do that, in your view, because he waits to see how things turn out on the ground.
I think in the moment, the president can make the decision to manage the situation with the normal forces. And here what we have is even that situation in June. I point the court to, I think it was June 14th is probably the worst of the circumstances that happened. And that day, the threat of violence from the protesters lasted 2 hours. And it's with the use of normal forces that they could stop the kind of incursion of the protesters, push them back, and everyone kind of had the safety that was necessary with using the normal forces. That stands in stark contrast to what happened in California. In California, there was a span of 2 days where they had consistent and increasing protest activity, where they were penning down officers, throwing concrete chunks. They used dumpsters as battering rams to breach the facility. And the next day, the confrontation lasted for another 7 hours. Protesters boxed in officers, threw Molotov cocktails, mortar-style fireworks, rocks. They blocked traffic and burned a vehicle.
But that's a little bit of the irony here, is that because the president acted in June in LA, I mean, I don't know that we have I don't know, but it seems like we don't have the same level of violence going on in LA right now. But the president acted when there was violence, and you're saying, well, if you don't hit it within a narrow window, you lose your right. That just seems unnaturally constrained. I mean, what the president did was bring in 115 FPS officials, and that has quelled the violence to some degree, it seems.
Señores, si uno junta todo esto, ¿no? Es lógico que el panorama parezca preocupante. Entonces tenemos figuras como la jueza Ellis, que está intentando poner límites, pero al mismo tiempo hay otros tribunales que podrían respaldar el uso militar dentro del país. Solo para que se den una idea de hasta dónde llega esto, en este momento se está discutiendo si es que Donald Trump puede movilizar tropas de otros estados, como la Guardia Nacional de California, por ejemplo, para que ellos entrenen a los de Illinois y patrullar las calles. Más o menos entienden el problema. O sea, estados usando fuerza militar contra su propia gente. Periodistas, sacerdotes, ciudadanos comunes, niños. ¿Es este el tipo de decisiones judiciales que son tan importantes Porque lo que está en juego no solo es política, es el derecho a la libertad de expresión, a la prensa libre, a poder protestar sin que de repente te lancen una pelota de gas. Así es, amigos. Ahora bien, señores, la excusa de los republicanos para el acuerdo de salud en medio del cierre gubernamental es una mentira descarada. Quiero que hablemos por un momento sobre esto, porque recientemente Hakeem Jeffries salió a hablar sobre este tema y fue directo, sin rodeos y con toda la fuerza política lo dijo. Mientras millones de estadounidenses están preocupados por perder su cobertura médica, los republicanos, amigos, están más interesados en salvar la cara de Donald Trump. Hakeem Jeffries lo clasificó como la mentira más descarada de la historia. Lo interesante de esa entrevista y por qué es el motivo por el cual estoy hablando de esto, es que lo hizo con números, con hechos, lógico, con la indignación que representa a millones de personas que ya están cansadas de los juegos políticos MAGA. Antes de que entremos al análisis, quiero que veamos parte de esa entrevista, la cual seguramente está dando mucho que hablar, así que presten atención.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries of the great state of New York. Leader Jeffries, thank you for coming to the weekend. So votes have been canceled for Tuesday through Friday. Speaker Johnson is not bringing the House back to order, not having Republicans come back to town. Is he making a tactical mistake by keeping Republicans out of the House? Wouldn't it put pressure on you and the Democratic caucus if they were in Washington and putting the screws to you guys to come to the table and either negotiate or push you to give him the votes, give Republicans the votes they need to get that CR over the finish line?
Well, the pressure continues to be on Republicans because this is a Trump Republican shutdown. And Democrats from the very beginning have made clear that we will sit down with anyone, anytime, any place, including on Capitol Hill, or go back to the White House in order to reopen the government, in order to enact a spending agreement that actually meets the needs of the American people, and to address the Republican health care crisis that is devastating people from all across the country. House Republicans canceled votes last week, canceled votes this week, and now they've canceled votes next week. They're running scared. They don't know what to do. They're unwilling to address the crisis that they've created, largest cut to Medicaid in American history, hospitals, nursing homes, community-based health centers all across the country closing because of what Republicans did in their one big ugly bill. And now they are refusing to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, which means tens of millions of Americans are going to experience dramatically increased premiums, copays, and deductibles, paying thousands of dollars per year more for their health insurance, which they will not be able to afford.
Leader Jeffries, just to follow up, a minute ago you said, you guys are there ready to meet anytime, anywhere. You're willing to go back to the White House. You and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer did go to the White House with Johnson and the Senate Majority Leader Thune to meet with the president. I'm just wondering, when you were in that meeting, did you get the sense that President Trump was eager to or would make a deal with you when it comes to at least extending the Obamacare subsidies?
Initially, there was an acknowledgement that something needed to happen with respect to addressing the health care of the American people. Now, Republicans didn't accept the blame for the crisis that they have visited on everyday Americans, and we were very clear. This is a Republican-created crisis, but there was some acknowledgement that there was a need to deal with the issue around the Affordable Care Act tax credits in some way, shape, or form. Now, the Republicans in that meeting suggested that they had all the time in the world to do something and that they didn't need to act now. And our view was that open enrollment starts on November 1st, and notices are going out right now to people all across the country. indicating that their health insurance costs are about to skyrocket in ways that will make things unaffordable for them to be able to even go see a doctor when they need one for themselves, their children, and their family. That's why our position has been clear from the very beginning, House and Senate Democrats holding strong, that we need to address this Republican health care crisis, and we need to do it with the fierce urgency of now.
Leader Jeffries, I want to ask you about a refrain that we have heard from Republicans over these past few weeks, that the premiums and that the premiums go to people who are making between $130,000 and $600,000, and that at the end of the day, that $600K is just too high of a number. Now, look, I have heard from people who are worried and have already heard from their insurance companies about who make very minimal income and are worried about losing their health care. But what about those families who are making $600,000? I mean, do you agree with some of these Republicans that that max should come down a little bit? Is this a handout to insurance companies?
Well, that's a stone cold lie that Republicans have been telling, and it's belied by the facts. 93% of the people who benefit from the Affordable Care Act tax credits make $63,000 or less, right? Those are working class Americans, everyday Americans, and middle class Americans. For instance, a couple that makes about $88,000 per year and currently receives Affordable Care Act tax credits, their health insurance is $8,000 a year. That's already too high, but they can at least afford it barely as a result of the Affordable Care Act tax credits. If they go away, those tax credits, that same couple, which makes $88,000 a year, would have to pay $24,000 for health insurance. They can't afford that. That will medically bankrupt them. Those are the type of people who we are working hard to protect their health care.
But, Leader, that might be the average, but that doesn't mean that people who make up to $600,000 a year, that those families who make that kind of money aren't eligible to receive these premiums.
No, it's not the average. It's the overwhelming majority. When you're talking about 93% of the people,
but do you think that do you think Democrats could still negotiate to potentially come down on that maximum?
Well, what we've said is that we're open to evaluate anything that is presented in good faith in terms of adjustments that may be proposed potentially that come out of the Senate in a bipartisan way. The challenge that we have in the House is that Mike Johnson has basically made clear we have no interest in doing anything about the health care of the American people. In fact, in that White House meeting, he said that health care is extraneous. No, health care is not extraneous, I pointed out in that White House meeting. It's central to the well-being of everyday Americans. That's why Democrats have raised it as an issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, so central that even Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is out there saying something needs to be done about this. But, you know, Congressman, speaking of good faith, one of the other sticking points that you and other Democrats have made in all of this, healthcare being issue bold number one, but a secondary issue is rescissions and how that is still on the table. Yesterday, Semaphore reported about a call that was done between the House Freedom Caucus with the press. And I want to read this. On this press call with the House Freedom Caucus, Johnson tells reporters, quote, "We worked on rescissions, and there'll be more of that we expect in the days ahead." Leader Jeffries, how can you negotiate with anyone who might agree with you on something on Monday, and then by Monday afternoon, once it's all firm and signed and official, it gives the White House the ability to snatch it all back? Is that good faith?
It's not good faith at all. And this is part of the challenge as well that we confront at this moment. Now, we've said we'll sit down and try to find a bipartisan path forward to reach a spending agreement that actually improves the quality of life for the American people. But part of that means that there's got to be enforceability once an agreement is reached, that it is actually followed by the administration, by the White House, and by the Congress. And that's why in the continuing resolution that was introduced by Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, the top Democrat on the Appropriations Committee in the House, and her partner, Senator Patty Murray, it also includes language to make sure that if we agree upon how taxpayer dollars should be spent to make life better for the American people, then those taxpayer dollars should be spent in that way.
Leader Jeffries, one more question before we have to let you go. New York State Attorney General Letitia James indicted indicted on bank fraud charges. Just your reaction to that, and whether this indictment will successfully lead to the prosecution of the state's chief law enforcement officer.
Well, Attorney General Tish James, who I've known for more than 20 years, is an incredible public servant. She's strong, she's brilliant, she's talented, she's hardworking, and she's got great integrity. This indictment is not worth the paper that it is written on. It's a malicious prosecution, and I believe that it's going to be dismissed in short order.
Ok, amigos, como pueden ver, esto no es un malentendido, ¿no? Esto es una crisis creada por los republicanos. Y ojo, no es cualquier crisis. Es una que está afectando directamente a hospitales, a centros comunitarios, a hogares de ancianos, a familias que apenas pueden pagar su seguro médico. Y bueno, mientras vemos a los demócratas que literalmente te están diciendo en la cara, podemos reunirnos en cualquier momento, en cualquier lugar, resolver esto, punto final, los republicanos liderados por MAGA, Mike Johnson, controlados por Trump, ¿qué es lo que hacen? Cancelan votaciones, desaparecen del Congreso y culpan a todos, menos a ellos mismos. Lo peor es que lo hacen mintiendo tan descaradamente, ¿no? Trump y sus aliados literal están diciendo que los beneficios del Obamacare son para gente rica. Imaginen eso. Para familias que ganan $600,000 al año. Pero claro que eso es una mentira. Hay datos. Aquí Jeffries lo dijo. El 93% de las personas que reciben ayuda del Obamacare ganan menos de $63,000 al año. Hablamos de gente trabajadora, clase media, familias que apenas sobreviven. ¿Qué pasa si eliminan ese subsidio? Esa misma familia de $63,000 al año pasaría de pagar $8,000 al año a $24,000 por su seguro. Es una locura, señores. ¿Dónde está la libertad económica? Eso es condenar a la gente a la bancarrota médica. ¿Y qué dice Trump? Que la salud es un tema secundario. O sea, imaginen, para un tipo que vive rodeado de médicos privados, yo creo que jamás ha tenido que elegir entre pagar renta o comprar medicinas. La salud del pueblo es un tema secundario. Yo creo que esa frase ya resume todo, ¿no? Lo que representa el movimiento MAGA. Desconexión total con la realidad. Pero ojo que el pueblo lo está viendo. Los costos médicos suben, los servicios cierran, las familias se endeudan y mientras tanto Trump sigue hablando de sí mismo, sin tener un solo plan real para bajar el costo de vida. Así que señores, ¿qué opinan ustedes? ¿Hasta cuándo ustedes creen que van a seguir los republicanos utilizando al pueblo como un rehén político, solo para mantener contento a Donald Trump? Porque una cosa es tener diferencias ideológicas, pero otra muy distinta es mentirle a todo el país mientras se derrumba el sistema de salud. Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme en este video. Recuerden, como siempre, déjame tu like, suscríbete al canal y comparte nuestro contenido. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.